WLA stands for, the civilian version of this bike was a WL. Well, the Army contracted with Harley-Davidson. Harley-Davidson won a contract bid competition to produce this bike. So they made the WLA. The A stands for Army. The numbers vary, but they made somewhere between 60 and 80,000. People argue back and forth how much, but the bulk of the motorcycles that the Army had were Harley-Davidson. In fact, Harley-Davidson pretty much had a monopoly on military bikes for the U.S. from World War I all the way into the 50s. For World War II, this was the primary bike of the U.S. military. It's a 45 cubic inch air-cooled flathead motor, 5 pounds compression. So not a real powerful motor. I think when it was new, it was 26 horsepower.
Oh, wow.
A whole 26 horsepower. But actually in 1942, this was a dirt bike. This was an off-road machine, and these guys would ride them the way people ride dirt bikes today. The interesting thing is they were going to have a bunch of these bikes at the beginning of the war, because these bikes were replacing the horses. They were done with cavalry. They even thought about using these bikes as cavalry in the 20s and 30s and making like cavalry charges with Tommy guns. That lasted about like one training event, and it was like, no, we're gonna kill more people with shooting each other than we will the enemy. But they decided it was, hey, it's still gonna be good for scouting and overland travel and MPs and all this stuff, so we're gonna have a bunch of these. Well, in 1941-ish, they put out a contract for a lightweight quarter-ton four-wheel drive truck, and the Bantam company entered the competition with the Jeep, and the rest is history, so to speak. And once the Jeep came out, they're like, we don't need all these motorcycles. We'll still make motorcycles, but we're going to make 1 million Jeeps. We're not going to make 1 million motorcycles. Because as much as I love this bike and as much fun it is to ride, the Jeep is faster. It carries 4 or 5 guys. It carries all their gear. It carries all their ammo, all their food, all their water. And the poor schmo that lived off the back of this thing was roughing it.
Yeah.
He had to have, where are you going to sleep? You're going to sleep on the ground. You're going to get wet. So that's kind of the evolution of that bike and how we ended up with the Jeep. The Jeep's a 1945 manufactured Willys MB. There were 2 companies that made the Jeep during World War II. It started out with the Willys company. They were a rather small company, and the government was like, you know what, we don't think you have the wherewithal to make all the vehicles we're going to need. And because we're the government, and especially during wartime, the government did whatever they wanted. And so they told Ford, you're going to start making Jeeps. So Ford was like, yes, sir. And so they started manufacturing Jeeps. Well, kind of funny in the trivia, Willys was stamping their Jeeps Willys, and Ford was stamping their Jeeps Ford. And Ford stamped every single part they made. Every nut, every bolt, every piece was stamped Ford. And so Willys was stamping Willys on their Jeep. And the Department of the Army said, knock it off. Knock it off. This is not a competition. We don't want to have people going, oh, I don't want the Willys, I want the Ford, and vice versa.
Right.
They didn't need that. And so the government said, knock it off. So after a few months, they stopped stamping Willys, they stopped stamping Ford, although Ford cheated, and they still had every single part on their Ford Jeeps were stamped Ford. And their excuse was, well, it's quality control. If there's a problem with parts, we want to know if it's our parts or
right.
Henry Ford did what Henry Ford wanted to do. You don't tell Henry Ford what to do. So there was 2 manufacturers, Willys and Ford. They made a gazillion of these things. They're really good, capable vehicles. After 1945, they created the civilian Jeep, the CJ. And I believe CJ stands for civilian Jeep. And so when you have a CJ5 or a CJ6 or 7 or 8 or whatever, all through the years, civilian Jeep. That's where they got the name from.
Wow.
And
awesome.
No one knows where the term Jeep came from. Rumor of, or conjecture of like, well, it stands for general purpose, so GP, Jeep. But it was also the Popeye cartoon. And they had this mythical creature named the Jeep who could go anywhere and do anything and became invisible. And so there's a lot of people that think that maybe Jeep came from the cartoon, Popeye cartoons of Jeep. It was Jeep was the name of the character.
Oh wow.
The two together are kind of cool. Today's the 250th birthday of the United States Army. So
Wow.
happy birthday, U.S. Army.
And did you serve in the Army?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, for a bit. I did active and guard, full active and part-time. I did 40 years. I was in from 20 until I turned 60. And then when I turned 60, the Army was like, you're done. We don't need you. Goodbye. No questions asked.
Wow.
I saluted smartly and said, thank you for letting me play all these years.
Right. Well, thank you for your service.
Hey, no problem.
This is an awesome, I had no idea that was a Harley, and I had no idea that was from Ford. So
Well, this is actually a Willys. This is
okay.
Yeah. So more than you probably want to know, the MB means Willys. If it's GPW, that means Ford.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for your time. That was
No
awesome.
person.